Welcome to the SwimSwam podcast. I'm your host, Coleman Hodges. Joining me today, we've got a very special guest. He is hot off of making his second Olympic team for the United States in the 100-meter fly. He's an Olympic champion. He's multiple world championship medalist. Today, we have the pleasure of sitting down and talking to Tom Shields.
Hey, everybody.
Great seeing you, great talking to you. We just talked about how hard of a meet trials can be. How are you feeling today after coming off of that meet?
Good. I think, today is Thursday, so it's been a good minute. I think like every time you come off, 6 or 7 days like that, it's just hard to reconnect to a week. Like, the weeks are just kind of getting on track of what day it is and getting back to my daily routine as quickly as I can, whether or not I'm training. You know what I mean? Like just kind of get into a rhythm and a flow and connect back with my life is always a good move. Where I feel like, this time that side of things isn't as hard because I'm, made the team. But when you're on a break or whatever, I feel like you can kind of like get lost in this like crazy new environment, personality-wise. So,
yeah, that definitely makes sense. I hear you there. You've been through this journey before, and so I kind of want to get your thoughts and reflections. And I wanted to start with the 2016 Olympic Games, and just coming off of that, did you experience, a lot of people call it an Olympic hangover, but did you have a come down or a low after that meet, after, such a high of making the team and then getting to be at the games themselves?
Yeah, I think everyone's going to have their own experiences with that, right? So mine in 16 looked a lot more like, I didn't really want to be a prelim only medalist. I feel like a lot of people, quote unquote, look down on that, or, it's one of those unspoken things that's kind of spoken a lot behind their backs. So as soon as I became one of them, everyone's like, oh no, it's great. But it's like, I've been in the sport long and I know what people mostly think of us. And it's kind of the weird spot because it's like, it's kind of like catching the bullpen. You get a World Series ring, but I just kind of served a role. And I technically earned that right. But I just like, is it really worth having a gold medal in my house? Like, so I still feel to this day like really weird about that. So I'm not the only guy, and there's a lot of us in that spot that that's as high as our career went. And for me, it was kind of hard because it's like, man, I'm really proud of that and like a testament of what it means to my career and like how I handled trials in 16. But for me, it's like not the coolest thing I've done. It's not even close to the best swim I've ever had. Like I swung, and especially that prelim for the fly specifically, if you're in the final, in the the normal prelims finals setup, that means your prelims in the morning or mid-afternoon, and you're in your individual final that night. So the other three guys in the relay are done. So they're like, hey, they're going to take care of you. You just kind of do whatever. So I kind of swung like a 51 high, which is, nowhere near what I'm capable of, quite obviously. Right. So it's kind of weird to like, when you go by the numbers, like the swim that specifically got me my gold medal is kind of like a whatever swim. But I mean, that's sports, you know what I mean? Like that's, you play a role. And I think the only reason it's hard for guys in that spot, the more and more I age, it's like, well, it's because I wasn't in that spot ever before in my life. Whereas like, I swim for myself mostly throughout the mornings in NCAA just because personnel number wise, and I was always in the water anyways. But I think, a lot of guys swim in the mornings for the guys who are, pretty good at NCAAs and at Pac-12s or at, these other international meets. It was like the only, time I faced that where I was the guy in the morning was the Olympics. So it's kind of a little humble pie. I swam in the morning for Michael and, who knows what's going to happen, but, this year would be for Caleb. They're pretty good. You know what I mean? So it's like, it doesn't hurt my feelings. So it's this really weird spot to be in. It's really hard to talk about emotionally because like not that many people find themselves in this spot. So it's really hard to relate. You know what I mean? Like I could talk to Tyler McGill, like that's about it. Cause like even Crocker was, able to, he found plenty of wins throughout his career. So, as I've talked to him a little bit, and I don't know him half as well as than on McGill. He's just a little bit older than me, but he gets it, but he's also just kind of like, he's a world record holder. So like that era of butterfly was different in the United States, obviously. So there really isn't that many of us when you really, really think about it. So it's just this weird spot you find yourself in where you're like, I'm stoked, but and now for like the rest of my career, like everyone's just going to know that. And it's like, I'm way more proud of personally, like feel accomplished. And like, when you look back at, it's selfish, obviously, but when I look back at my career, it's like, well, I kind of wish that they knew about this swimmer, that swimmer, like, other things that I think are pretty cool. And that's just not how the world works. Like, and everyone kind of attaches to the games. And for the most part, like to the lay person, it's like that's good enough because they're not going to care enough about swimming anyways. But like within swimming, now I'm just kind of painted as this like, oh, prelim only medalist, which is true. I mean, it is probably the highest accomplishment I've had in the sport. But I don't know, especially the short course stuff for me specifically. I'm like, hey, like this is pretty cool. And that's going to be, whenever I bring back to swimming, it's like I lament how small potato short courses seemed like because, and this is every country. And I think the last time I was on this podcast, I said this is like, you talk to the Brazilians and they're like, oh, no one really cares about short course, but we really like it. And you talk to the Russians, same thing. You talk to the British people. It's like, oh, we grew up swimming short course, not that much long course. So most of our development stuff, short course, we really like it. And the Australians are like, oh, we know the long pool is really important, but we really like the short course stuff. And we do this, this, and this. And it's like, man, everyone's swimming short course and everyone likes it. So we just say like, it's part of the sport at this point. Like, and obviously in the United States, we do it in college. So yeah, whatever.
So throughout that next,
sorry, I'm off practice.
Yeah. Tom is kind enough to join us just after practice, leaving for Hawaii for training camp on Sunday, I think, or sometime early next week. So he's sitting down with us, he's chatting. So over the next couple of years in 17 and 18, from a layman swim fan's perspective, it's just kind of like, well, they did really well at the Olympics, so I assume they're going to just keep doing well and keep doing well. And right. And people don't realize how much work goes into that and how much emotion you have to put into training to be an elite athlete. So especially coming off of the games with that prelim, I'm this prelim only swimmer mindset. Did that manifest in your training or your motivation at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt like in 17, I'm like, oh, now I have to be something. Whereas I think like before the games, like in 16, I was like, cool, whatever. This is what I am. Like, I'm just a dude. Whereas like, you make the teams and you get this huge ego. Like I don't think it affected me super hard, but I was definitely trying to like be something, quote unquote. Like, oh, now I'm this, whatever. Everyone looks at me, which is true. Like everyone's kind of noticing you more because you made the team, but and it almost like infects your brain. You have to like fight that. I've found like it's just ego stuff, and it doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? So you go like, especially as like a defending Olympic qualifier or whatever that means. I'm like, oh, now like I have this like legacy. But I was like, no, you don't. Like, no one cares. You know what I mean? Like, people like care because they saw you make a team, and like they either like you or don't like you. And you're not going to change that. You know what I mean? Like how, if you swim bad, they're going to like you if they like you. And if you swim good, they're not going to like you if they don't like you. So you just have to learn to be okay with that. Or I have to learn to be okay. I had to learn to be okay with that. So yeah, like, especially in 17, I'm like, oh, like I didn't make the team. Like how embarrassed am I? Like I got out in prelims in the 200 fly again. And I think that was good for me. Like immediately, like 8 months later, and just be like, oh yeah, like, no one really cares. You know what I mean? Like, and that in a good, like as a good way, like, the people who, the guys who I will use the F word here, but like the people who F with you, like the people who fuck with you, the people who are going to fuck with you. And if they don't fuck with you, they're just not going to. So that's not going to change. And I think that's the best lesson I learned from that. And just kind of like got over myself. So like headed, 5 years later or whatever, like heading into trials again, I'm just kind of like, whatever, what I mean? I'm just swimming, like, keep it simple. And like, yeah, I mean, 18 was fine. Like I thought I swam pretty good. I just, missed a couple of touches here and there along the way, especially in the 200, which happens, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, that's like, especially like, everyone's like, oh, this quad was so hard for you, like blah, blah, blah. You had missed every team. And I'm like, dude, but like, look at my 16 meet. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like I owed a couple touches back. So I was never like too bummed about any of that.
That's a good point. Uh, I mean, so you missed the team in 17, and then I mean, leading into 18, just from a day-to-day perspective, not even focusing on making a team, but I mean, did can you compare the motivation you had in the 15-16 season leading up to the Olympics, compared to the motivation you have of I really want to perform at my peak or achieve X goal heading into, a Pan Pac trials in 2018?
I think I was almost like way more disciplined and motivated
Mm.
in the lead up to 18, but the caveat being that only started in December or January of 18.
Mm.
I had, when you like, that's what's like dangerous thinking in quads. Cause like now that I've looked back, it's like, oh, I got back in October of 16, trained a little bit, went 43, whatever, went to short course worlds, did pretty good. Then like pretty disciplined, okay, disciplined through that trials. I think I swam pretty good there, all things considered. And then I kind of trained on my own, went to the World Cups, and then I got really sick again. And I've gotten really sick a couple times in my career. And so then I got surgery in like October and November of 17. My first full week of where I could say like I lifted 3 times and swam 9 times, and none of them were like just doing what I can coming off surgery would be January. So like, yeah, I wasn't doing that in 14, 15, and 16. You know what I mean? So, and then in, the fall of 18, we'll get to that if you'd like, but
Yeah.
that's where I tried to, I had gotten a big concussion in August. I was supposed to go to the World Cups, and I was like looking to be pretty disciplined. And, after 18, like I missed Pan Pacs or whatever, but I stayed in the water. It's like, that's 2 weeks. So it's not really that long. And then I had vasovagal syncope, or I get it sometimes. I don't know how to describe that because it can happen to anyone. It's like anxiety driven around traveling specifically. There's like certain little markers that I need to learn to look for. Now that I've learned, like I need to get to the ground and like squeeze my legs, squeeze my glutes, and like just kind of hold, because that's going to push your blood out and keep your blood pressure high enough. If you struggle with this, go talk to a doctor. Don't listen to me. But from my interpretation, it was like I freak out, so my blood comes into like my organs as I'm going into shock, and then I know I'm freaking out, so I slow my breath down to try and relax, and that makes my blood pressure drop, and then I faint. And I'm already pretty low blood pressure to begin with, being an athlete. So that's how it's been explained to me. But in 18, it happened a couple times in my life. Like in AP Bio, we were watching a pregnancy, and it's like pain sympathy is another big trigger. So it's like, not watching a pregnancy, watching a birth. Sorry. And so I was just out, and I like fell out of my desk. That was like the first time it ever happened. But in 18, I was out on my feet, and the first thing to hit the ground was my head. So I got a pretty big knock, where I was out of the water and pretty messy for a while. And then like a month later, I tried to hang myself. And so just from a training perspective, I know this is a long answer to your question, but I wasn't really in the water. You know what I mean? Like there was no weeks there where I was like, I was in the water the whole week. That being said, like I tried to hang myself on a Wednesday. I'm lifting and swimming on Friday. We had kind of figured out by that point, just with how hard the being in the water consistently through the concussion was. And like I was just saying, like after the games this year, like, cause I know how I am and I know me specifically, and the ISL is coming up. Like, I'm going to take a day, maybe take a couple days, maybe go camping, go diving. But I want to be in the water pretty quick, not because like I care about my goals or like, I don't even know. Like, let's say I don't have that. And like, I have maybe short course worlds or just maybe world trials next year. And that's what I'm looking at. I'm still going to try and be in the water that first week back, or working out, even that's just lift and bike, just because I know for me, like, I'm not the first person to invent this, but routine and schedule is like very good for my life, right? Like, I can go off the deep end pretty fast, whether that be substances or depression or whatever, right? So, I'm almost 30. It took me a while to kind of figure that out, but it's like take a couple of days to just keep it up, because so much is changing through that first couple of days off. It's like, okay, just do push-ups or get up, like force yourself awake, like, because like especially in 16, I noticed that like if I'm just going to the beach, all doing whatever, And by that time, I was still a whole ass adult. Like I was 26, 25. So like, it's like cool to see your friends on the weekend, but then there's like 5 days in between where like no one's available. You're just kind of like, what am I doing? And then you're surprised. I was so surprised how quickly like 8 weeks can go by. And I'm like, oh man, like I haven't done anything. And so it's like, well, and that's when I found like, well, I just work out in the mornings. And then you kind of have that like latent morning period to just kind of be like, okay, well, what am I doing? And you kind of get your life organized and you get your stuff together. And you're like, okay, I need to talk to this person. I need to do this. I need to, and like keep these work relationships up or whatever. Right. So I don't know if that was a coherent answer, but to get to it, no, like that wasn't doing that in 14, 15, and 16. I was also like, I took 2 weeks off on my honeymoon, but you know what I mean? It's not the same type of like freedom of schedule. Like you obviously with another person throughout that time, there's a hard date going back to OTC off my honeymoon and et cetera, et cetera. So like for whatever reason, like mechanisms in my life pre-Olympics were not the same ever post-Olympics. I think a lot of that is obviously youth, or that is, the games after my graduation where after that point, a lot of people or relationships in your life, like, oh, like they figured it out, they can figure it out now. Where I think for me, I was a little latent to pick that up. And I'm not unique in that either. I think that this is a sport where a lot of adults retire or don't do it. So a lot of us are just kind of like keep up these immature habits. And I am no exception to that. And I'm not blaming anyone else. I'm more saying other people do it so I don't look like bad, obviously. But it's a weird job, right? It's a very weird job we live in.
I mean, yeah, you said it. We obviously covered a lot of ground there, but I think those were all great points. I mean, that's, I think to sum it up, this is not easy. It's not easy to train at an elite level, to compete at an elite level like you've been doing for years and years and years.
I've been working my butt off, especially since call it December of 18, right? When I finally came back,
yeah,
I got involved. Like that was, this is public information. You should look it up. But this is when I got involved in the lawsuit with the ISL, and we got to go to London, and that was like a big kickstart. So like, hey, I want to actually do this, because I was kind of like after Pan Paxton, after the concussion, and after the, really weird like couple months where I can't even, the days just kind of bled together leading into my attempt. I was like, hey man, maybe I shouldn't be swimming. You know what I mean? Like, and then I just got this opportunity, and it's like, man, this is, especially with the ISL specifically, it's like, this is exactly what, like, it's not made up. Jack Roach, Brett Hawk, and I, in 2011, we were at WUGS, and we were like, man, this is boring. Like, I'm in this swim meet and I don't want to watch it. If you've been to WUGS, you know what I'm talking about. If you've been to that meet, like, I'm a big fan of all the swimmers there, but it's just like, it's so much to do about nothing. And you're like, what is this? Like, a simi at WUGS? Like, are you kidding me?
They had simis
No
there?
offense to the meet. No offense to the meet. In 2011, they did.
Oh, man.
And again, I don't mean any disrespect. I'm just like, hey, we can be doing better. And we kind of came up with like pretty close to what the ISL looks like. And so when a bunch of money comes behind that idea, like no matter what point in my career I'm at, I'm like, okay, I got to do this. And so I'm very thankful for that, because that got me back, like my head back in the game, where I saw like a future for myself. And obviously at that point I wasn't thinking about the Olympics at all. And so from that point forward, I've been like locked in. I've missed maybe one practice from being sick or whatever, being overslept or underslept. Obviously, like the huge problem with me in my career has been sleep. Just getting enough anxiety, not getting enough sleep because of anxiety or overthinking or just caffeine or just out of rhythm, out of habit, like routine and schedule. I'll come to it again. I can get it again and again in this conversation. That's been one of the number one things for me that I can point to. That's easier to talk about. Like, it's hard to talk about. I'm not against it, but I'm not going to naturally go to in an interview like the little exercises I do or like the deep-seated emotional work that I do with my therapist. It's important. It's just a little bit more private, right? But the routine stuff, like, yeah, man, it's good. It's like, I don't know what my life would have looked like had I retired after my senior year, or had I never swam. As a kid, like the 9 practice or the 10 practice schedule, like really kept me going for a long time. I'm also not unique in that. I think a lot of us can look at like our high school days and be like, man, if I wasn't going to those practices, like what would I have been up to?
So much free time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think every swimmer can look at their non-swimmer friends and just be like, what do you do after school or before school? Like, how do you spend all that time?
I would have gotten into some trouble for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned routine is a big part. You mentioned therapy, and I don't want to talk about the specific things you work on in therapy, but you've talked about being in therapy before. When was that? When did you seek that out? And can you tell me just about the process of just
Yeah.
being like, okay, I think this might be a good thing for me to.
Yeah. So when I was getting married, I come from a pretty religious background. Is when I was growing up, super religious, and we had kind of decided, yeah, we're going to use a pastor through conversations, arguments with like my parents or whatever, right? And we were kind of like leaning that way, anyways, or maybe like have Dave or Yuri or a dude from the team or someone in our lives. But then we ended up doing a pastor. Like I think it's like let's just do traditional, blah blah, whatever. The reason that's important is he wanted us to do pre-marriage counseling. And we were like, okay, dope. Like we'll do it, but like, why not? Like I'm a very like car broke take two mechanic guy in my head. So I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do pre-marriage counseling, then I'm going to do it with a counselor, like someone who does, brain stuff for a living. And so we were kind of looking in our area, like who's the dopest, blah, blah, blah therapist. And we found a guy, highly reviewed. It was on like Psychology Today. Like what you do, you know what I mean? Like what hotel are we going to stay at? What's the highest reviewed hotel? What can I afford? Same thing, right? So we go to him for a few sessions. We really like him, so we stick with it. Like we just found like it really helped our relationship. Through like, every relationship has weird spots where you get stuck and we didn't even know we had. And so we stuck with it through like the first year. And this was like 2014, 2015. And then it really helped like me and her, or me and my wife, Gianna, just like with ourselves too. It's like, oh, this is dope. Cool. Whatever. Like I've never had too much like too much stigma around it. Like I've been to a therapist in high school. My sophomore year, I had some, depression, suicidality issues. Like it's been a history for me. So I was like, cool, whatever. I didn't really think of it as like related to that at the time. The only reason I brought that up is years go by, you know what I mean? Nothing like, pre-Olympics, I don't really do much. 17, 18, not much. I mean, I guess only 3 years go by now that I say it out loud. You just thinking like when you're living quads, you think of like 16 is so far away from 14, but it's really not.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 whatever. So yeah. And then I have my attempt, and that day we just like, hey, who do we know? Like, what can we get help with here? So we called him, we saw him that day. I saw him twice a week, same guy. So he just got really lucky. He's like, hey, I do this. Like, this is he's a, marriage and family therapist, but he also does EMDR trauma stuff. I don't know the specific CBT or whatever. These are all things you can Google and read about. Don't use this as a resource. So it was just like perfect. And so I saw him twice a week for a while, maybe 3 times a week for the first couple of weeks. And then I've been doing weeklies ever since. The only weeks I've taken off were ISL in Budapest. It was just like, I felt like I was in a good rhythm there. And it was just like a 7-hour time change. And like the meets weren't, like it wasn't the same set pattern every week. So it was hard for me to find times, but I know, through that time period that I don't want to do that again. So I'll probably take like the games week off. I took the trials week off, but literally outside of that, I mean, it's been every week. It's been, yeah. So like I've been pretty damn disciplined with that. Like, I can only point to a few times where it hasn't worked out weekly, and it's cool. So we do a lot of like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and a lot of recreation of self, RCS or something like that. I think that's what he calls it. Like we don't really, I mean, he's not teaching me how to be a therapist. So, we're not really like over like, this is what this is, and this is why we do it. And this is the study that blah, blah, blah. I don't know. But it's with me, he's very, I would call it athletic is how I've used it, or how I've called, he's like, hey, look, like, so I live right next to a pretty big intersection in Berkeley. So, and there's, he's really nice, but there's a blind guy who uses this crosswalk here. So it's really one of the, in the city, I'm making this part up, but it really seems like, they're looking at where he's walking sometimes. So there's really loud, blind, like beep, beep right here. And like, it annoys the living hell out of me. I understand why it's there. I don't want it to leave. But it's just like really loud. So like one of the first times, cause he wanted me to do this like new exercise thing that he was working on with me. And I'm just like, yeah, I mean, whatever, dude. Like, how like, you're too prideful and too good for therapy, but like obviously you need it. So I was kind of in that mode. So he was like, okay, pick something that just annoys you. That's like not related to trauma or thoughts that led to this. It's like just bugs you. And so that I was like, well, this thing happens and it bugs the living hell out of me. So, okay, so we're going to do this exercise. I think we talked about it in your podcast once, but it's like, I literally just sit there and do this. So it's like 2.5 intervals and attached to like a positive memory. So like a date I've had with Gianna or body surfing with my friends or free diving or spearfishing, just like a really fun time you had, and like try and get in that like trance mode. And then don't like have like, he always says it, like imagine you have like a flash drive, and in that flash drive is a file with and the name of it is the title of the story of like an invasive thought. So in that example, it was like the beep beep thing. But don't like actually think about it. Don't put yourself in that moment. Just become aware that that file exists. And then like every like 5 to 10 of these, and then you kind of blink while you do it. And then you kind of go back and then go immediately back, like do your best to not think about it again and go back to that positive resource. It has some name. I never forget what it is. I mean, I never remember what it is. And that's dope. And that is like 98% of my therapy. It's just like invasive thoughts, getting back to my prefrontal cortex, if you will, or, rewiring my brain through behavior stuff. I don't know science. All I know is behavioral therapy, CBT, RCS. Those are the words that I'm supposed to say. I think that's kind of what I do. But yeah, so that's the stuff. Like I've done EMDR. It seems a little invasive and kind of like hard. Like, I don't know. I don't need to, like, for whatever reason, like this whole, the way he's explained it, let me start that whole sentence over, is EMDR can kind of like go back and like, it goes deep into like traumatic events and helps you kind of like lessen their volume in your head or whatever, the intensity through that. Whereas like the process or the exercise I just described to you has found through some studies to do the same thing or similar things without being as directly going through whatever traumatic event or invasive thought or whatever. And for me, it works. So I didn't need to like have this scientific argument out. I'm just like, this is cool. It works really well. Yeah. So that's pretty much what I do, man. Yeah.
Which is awesome. And again, I think a big topic of conversation at trials was mental health and just making people aware of it, and wanted to touch on that with you because it seems like you are aware of it, and obviously you are doing things to get your mind healthy, which is really great. I mean, I love everything you just said. I want to do this now.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, like, I've asked him, I was like, I don't want to share like the specific directions, like if people try it on their own. And he was like, you can. I mean, like, you're not trained to teach it like he is, but like if you share your experience and someone can try it, like that's really all there is to it. Like, it's nice when like Gianna's there and she can kind of like squeeze my hands, or like he's there so he can like walk me through it. But at the end of the day, like I do it on my own, and it's the same thing. Like that is like it. And then obviously there's other thing. Like I've done other things. I've done CBT worksheets or talk through problems with him, or learn how to like turn left where you used to turn right in a specific, like highly emotionally charged spot, like, in your relationships at work or with my spouse or whatever. And like, of course, that's just like therapy stuff. But for me, it's like, it all comes down to the same thing. It's like circular thought, invasive neural pathway, whatever you want to think about it. And you're stuck in your reptile brain or whichever of those you attach with. And you need to do something to get into your prefrontal cortex and make a decision based on who you are, based on who you want, like, you know what I mean? Like who you choose to be, and not associate like yourself with those negative actions or negative pathways. It's the same process, right? So yeah, I don't know.
So
I'm doing the best I can here to explain something.
Yeah,
really
I mean, that's great. I love it, and so I love hearing about it. So I want to jump ahead a little bit. Mm-hmm. So we get through 2 seasons of ISL. It's season 2. you looked phenomenal in the water. You know,
Yeah, thank you.
I
Yeah, it
think
was
you told me, yeah, it was one of the best seasons of swimming you've had.
period. It was very surprising. I mean, after singles all summer, and I think that just kind of goes to show something that I've had on my mind since 2018. Because in 2018, I kind of like I went and I learned from band check, and I talked to all these people. I've done a couple camps with Bowman and that like American system, and like obviously I've been a student of Durden my whole life, and everyone's always going to be like have an answer, which is good. I think it's coach's job to have an answer and have a plan, and like through their experience, all three of those coaches or every single coach I've ever talked to has had a ton of success with it. Mm-hmm. So they've kind of like, a lot of coaches have their own theories. A lot of them overlap, obviously, like, oh, resistance training, aerobic, blah, blah, blah. Like it's all the same thing.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that this summer proved is like, none of us know 100%. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I lifted 4 times a week, which I don't do. I rode my bike 2 to 3 times a week, and I did single swims from whatever it was, March. So 6 months. And obviously, like, I had been training really well before that. Like I had, 51 high, 138 in February, long course 100 fly, short course 200 fly in San Diego. So like I was in a good spot for sure. But for 6 months we did that. And then we did like 2 to 3 weeks of like normal schedule because we got back into Cal in August. So I guess 4 or 5, just maybe 6 weeks. I might be lying on that. I don't know, but whatever. It was a slow build up. Right. And then we go to Budapest, and like I have that season, and like I shaved for all of those for sure, but that's 6 weeks, and I was able to drop a full second in the 100 and 2 full seconds from where I started out in the 200, and just didn't start out very slow. So it was surprising. I didn't expect that, and it just kind of goes to show that I think that like we worked our butts off in the summer. We weren't just like going to the pool doing whatever. And like if we had 2 hours in the water, then Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday specifically, they were hard. But like Wednesday and Saturday were recovery practices. But you needed them to be like I was doing 2-hour lifts out here on the balcony, so I wasn't just sitting around. But it just like goes to talking to Dave after that. It just kind of goes to show that like we get these like paradigms, like you need 9 or 10 swims a week, or you need to do this, or like you just have to go fast. And that's one thing that Durden's really good about is like whatever the circumstances are, we're going to figure it out. That's always been his attitude. Even if we have like the ideal training week at Cal where we go, the double, single, double, single, double, single, or that week where we just go 6 singles, he created a paradigm, he got a plan together, and that's to his credit, like 100%. He found the pools and all that. There's a large reason we swim well, and I swim well specifically, and it's Dave and Chase. And then we picked up Roman. It's those guys. Those guys really made it happen, and those guys who got us to the pool every day and made it available. But we showed up and we slammed, and we weren't all together. Like I went like 5 or 6 months without seeing half the mid D group. You know what I mean? Like I was over at a different pool for most of them. So I got to see. I was swimming with Selly and Zach Eden and Grisham and a couple other guys. Trent, a couple of guys were splitting time just based on like their house schedule and stuff coming up. But I think it was a couple other people. And we were the sprinters were on the other side of the pool from us. So that's kind of was our little group. And then most of the other mid-D guys were at this other facility. So it was kind of weird, man. But just kind of, again, I can't drive the point home enough. I just don't think that, I think COVID has shown that a lot, like through the theories of swimming fast, or like the theories of who's in control or who's at the wheel. It's like, hey, man, no one's at the wheel of like this entire country. That's my opinion at this point. And everything that we don't really know. Sorry, I have grapes in my hand. We don't really know anything. You know what I mean? We just it's a good reminder.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, a huge learning curve process, I think, like you said, throughout the COVID year. So and then you go to ISL, you're like, all right, I'm doing well, I'm swimming fast. So then how does that influence your approach to these trials, especially knowing what it's like to be make an Olympic team, to go to a games, and knowing that ISL season 3 is soon to follow?
Yeah, I think everyone's different. And so some people like blow themselves up, right? So it's like, okay, got to be confident. It's got to go my way. Like I really want it to go my way. and at least like publicly and forwardly into my network and to my coworkers. That's how I'm going to be. I don't mean to say that's default, but that seems to be the default. That seems to be how a lot of people are. Where I know it kind of bugs my coworkers or my wife or my coaches, because I'm definitely not that way in my head. You know what I mean? Like I'm kind of like, it's probably not going to happen. We'll see. And it's kind of like protecting yourself, right? Because like obviously you want to go, but I'm like, there's been parts where I don't even want to go to the games, like, or like I'll say something like that. I just want to train and blah 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 blah. And it's like, it's a protection mindset. Obviously, it's immature, so I try to keep it to myself or the inside circle of guys who I know can handle me being kind of myself or the guys who are there for you. And I have plenty of them at the pool, the coaching staff, my wife. Like I have no shortage of that. But for me, that's definitely how I've been. There's a couple of guys, I don't want to out him too hard. I think Tony's been pretty publicly like this for a while. So I think Irvin is this way 100%. And for me, it just works. So it's like, even at trials, it's like, we'll see how, like, just kind of like keep it open. Like, we'll see how it goes. Like, obviously odds aren't in your favor until a certain point when they kind of were. But we can talk about that a little bit if you want. But yeah, so that's kind of my attitude. And like, for me, I think in 16, I didn't really have a plan of what I was going to do if I didn't make it. Like, I think I maybe just quit. I don't know, though, because Short Course World is right around the corner. So it wasn't like, I can't tell you I was thinking about that at all. And I think that put a lot of pressure on the meet, where now I was like, we had like a 10-minute Zoom call with Durden, like every single person does. He runs it through like a 3-day period right after NCs. It's usually once in the fall and once in the spring. Like, obviously I talk to Durden every day, and the plans can shift and change, and we text and we talk, blah, blah, blah. But like in that 10-minute meeting, it's like, hey, what's the next 6 months look like until the next 10-minute meeting? And in that meeting, we spent like, I was like, hey, look, let's spend 5 minutes on what it looks like if I make it, and 5 minutes on what it looks like if I don't. And I think for me, that was perfect. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay, I know I have somewhere to train. I have a plan moving forward. Obviously the ISL, the World Cups, and potentially Short Course Worlds, they're saying they don't know how they're going to pick that yet, but
that roster always seems like a mystery.
Yeah, well, especially in the year zero, like I'm not throwing any stones on that, and I've gotten pretty upset before. It's difficult when they leave the fastest American ever home in that event. I'm not the only American that's happened to. I don't claim this is personal, and they understand my frustrations. I don't think I'm airing any dirt here. Like it's a tough spot. Because of what are you going to do? Like, have a short course trials? We don't no one has short course meters times. And the biggest drama this always is the 100 IM, right? It's like, how do we enter this event? It's going to be easier with the ISL, I'm hoping, because more Americans are going to have short course meters times. But in 18 or 16 or 14, it's like, hey, look, 3 of you have official times. FINA wants official times. They don't want us to enter yards, or they don't want to do a subjective picks. They did let us do that in 16, but now they're going to shy away from that a little bit more. So whatever. And that's not my world. That's them. I know it's hard spot. So I don't want to say anything too negative about people who I love and I think are, the best supporters of us in the world at USA Swimming specifically. But it's been frustrating. I'm not going to lie about that. Like 18 and 2010, I didn't go at all. And in 2012, I didn't get the 200. And it's just kind of like, it's frustrating, but I'm not the only one it affects. You're good. Sorry, my wife's sneaking by. Blah, blah, whatever. But so we don't know what's going on with that. Right. So, okay, let's keep that in our back pocket. We have the ISL. So like, we'll take a week or two, not two, like half a week or a week, and then get back in the water if I don't make it, which would be today. Right. I'd be back already basically. And just kind of start moving through. Oak Club Day is going fast because they have a short course meters pool over there. It's really easy. And getting ready for the ISL. So, or make the team, and that's easier. Like schedule wise, right? Like that, those aren't my decisions. Just do what they say. So it was good. It was a really good meeting, and it really helped me like settle my brain and be like, okay, like, because the hardest part of these trials meets for me has always been like, well, my program leaves. You know what I mean? For the most part, like Cal's still here, and Chase left in 18, and the guys took a break, or since then, like Durden is gone, or Chase is at Wugs. Like the summers are hard at Cal for that reason. Like we're a very successful program, and for that reason, it's like, especially in 19, it was like, man, we have like 3 to 4 different meets depending on, you know, the 3 American meets and then the foreigners kind of mixed in around there. And it's like, we have like over almost 30 guys swimming internationally. So it's like kind of hard to keep all these plates spinning for the coaches. And we're very thankful for them. But when you don't make it, you're kind of like, well, like the spirit of the group I've been working with, you know what I mean? Like Ryan, Selly, Josh, Nathan, myself, and the foreigner pros, like after American trials, it kind of goes somewhere else. So you're kind of like, well, what am I going to do? And I've been there enough. And so I just like, I want to have a plan together. And, you know, because that can be difficult, not only emotionally, but just like logistically.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I wouldn't even, I would never have considered that, but totally makes sense. Okay. So I have to touch on this. You said you weren't sure about trials until you were.
Oh, I mean, I had a really good semi swim. I hadn't been under 51.5 in a while, and nobody else was under 51.5. And I always kind of used that. It's a made up number, but it's kind of like 53.0 in the 100 back, I would say. I don't know about in terms of eliteness. That's not what I'm getting at. But like once you get under that, you can get under that. You know what I mean? And I don't know how the math makes that make sense or whatever. It's one of those like spiritual things. So it's like I was kind of looking at the results from the final and being like, okay, like it was pretty good for me. You know what I mean? I don't mean any offense to the other 6 guys or the other 4 or whatever amount of guys. So it was like that last day. It's like I need to have a really solid swim, and that's why it was hard for me not to get results oriented after the semi. I say that because in 16, you know what I mean, I was like 5th, and I either swam in lane 6 or 7 at night. I can't remember. No, Phelps was 7, so I was in lane 6. So whatever, 4th. Yeah, and I'm just getting to it in my head. Sorry. And there was like 2 51.2s in the semi. Like 16 was like crazy. You know what I mean? So that's what I meant. Like it just wasn't the same. It wasn't the same event. Well, you know, those guys retired or you know, Jack failed the final and things had kind of shifted. Right. So, yeah, that's all I meant by that.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, I think a lot of swimmers can relate to that mindset of once you get under X barrier, like you're there, you can do it again. But crossing that threshold is much harder than actually staying there once you're there.
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, dude, I worked my tail off for 5 years, for 3 years to drop 100. You know what I mean? Like, so swimming's hard, man. It's really difficult. You know, I was 51.20 in the trials final. And that's the fastest I've been since that is when I tied that in the trials semi, and then I dropped 100th in the final. And it's 100 fly is a frustrating game, man. I mean, outside a day and a half, those are my 3 best times. You know, then there's a day and a half in 2015 where I go 51.06, 51.09, and 51.03 through prelim, semis, and finals. And those are, you know, that's the fastest I've ever been. And it's frustrating because it's like lack of development, always going to be frustrating. And then it's like, I feel like I'm as good as these guys, but there's so many 50-point mids now and faster. So it's like, isn't, you know, so it's hard to keep that faith and think that something might happen for you, but I did do it differently this time. So I was out 23 mid for the first time in my life. So I have hope, you know, something might happen. So we're, you know, trying to keep my head down.
Yeah. And beautiful place to wrap up. I mean, just heading into Hawaii for training camp, heading into Tokyo for these games. Yeah. How are you feeling about it this second go around?
Oh, dude, I'm stoked. And I think, you know, my head's in the right place. Like I wanted to go for the right reasons, and I was afraid to miss it for the right reasons. So what I mean by that is, you know, I want to go because I want to continue this process with Team USA, obviously, but specifically with Bryce and Ryan and Andrew. You know, so I feel for the first time in a long time where I was seeing something through with them on the equal level, whereas, you know, in 17 and 18, I didn't feel like that. And so and I didn't, you know, I was afraid to miss it because I was afraid I was going to miss out on the time spent with those 3 and Dave and of course USA Swimming, like, and of course all the other athletes. And I would love to go, and I love Gunnar and I love Zach and I love Caleb, and I would love to work with other flyers as much as I possibly can. But and so it felt nice, you know what I mean, to want to spend time with these guys. And there was no like, oh, I need to go, or I need to blah, 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 like protect something, or like achieve something. I was like, no, I want to go because I want to be with these people. I really enjoy this time. And I was really happy about that.
That's so cool. I don't know how else to say it. I thank you so much, Tom, for sharing these thoughts, for sharing your journey over the last 5 years. I think it's really great to get this kind of insight because it's not always something that's on the front page or in the headline. And so I really appreciate you sharing and taking the time out of your busy week. Before we sign off today, just any parting thoughts for our audience?
I mean, get help if you need it. Don't ask how I asked would be my recommendation. If you asking people, like suicidality specifically is so hard because there's a culture around it. And that I played into, you know what I mean? People who want to die. Is a really shitty attitude, in my opinion. And I definitely had it for a time. And that means, like, if you want to try to kill yourself, you should try to kill, you know what I mean? Like, why didn't you try? It's just terrible. And you get this like real bad mindset when you're treated that way, or when you think about that way yourself. Like, ask for help, you know what I mean? And it's easier said than done on the receiving end of that. Because a lot of people, when, you know, oh, I feel like this. And what I mean by this, I feel like I want to kill myself. And it's like, well, you're just complaining, or, you know, whatever. And then you try, and this isn't what happened to me. And then you might try, and then people are like, oh my God, like, where was I? Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, I don't know. It's this weird dynamic in this spot, or in this, you know, however we handle suicide in this culture, that, or suicidal ideation in this culture, that's really weird. I understand it because I think there are a lot of like excuse driven depression statements, and people definitely want to like look at everything like that. And my whole idea and my whole life, you know, like a little inside baseball, but I 5150 one of my friends when I was 15 because he said it. You know, I mean, I told his parents, and we called the police, and it's like, hey, look, man, if you're doing, like, in the way that I thought about it in my head was like, if you're doing this to be shitty and like manipulative and like try and get me to do something, you need to learn to not do that. There's only one way to do that. And if you're not lying, this is what I should be doing. So like, there is like just 5150, I'm just do like, I don't know. So like, I'm almost like way more on that side of the line. It's like, I think people ask for help or say things. I really do. Like, whether it's esoterically or directly, like, they're going to make it known, in my experience, before they do anything to somebody. I didn't. So that happens too. I totally understand that. But like, if and when those spots come up, just 5150, like, it's not going to be that big a deal. You never have to publicly tell anyone you did it. And there is some infrastructure. It's not good. It's not the best in the world, obviously, but there's some infrastructure in this country to do something about it. I know this is like, sorry, this is probably way gnarlier than you thought this sign off was going to be, but it's just, it's frustrating because like, if they are being, you know, psychopathically selfish, and they're going to learn that's not something that you can do that way. And especially with you, you're putting that boundary down. And if they're being honest, then you might have saved their life. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know. You know what I mean? Because everyone's like, oh, you know, this person tried to kill themselves as a cry for help, or this person, you know, faked it, or this, that, or the other. And it's like, you know, I've read Durkheim on suicide. I spent the greater part of my life obsessed with suicide, reading about it all I could. You know, I felt this way for a long time. I don't know if that's what it's called, but it's the one where Durkheim kind of proved that more people try to kill themselves on Wednesday. Wednesday morning was for me. So it's like, his whole argument was like, you know, it's a function of society. He was trying to prove that sociology should exist. But whatever, that's not really part of this discussion. More of what I mean is I've thought about this a lot. And, you know, there's like 596 people in this one article I read had tried to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived, or there's been 596 people and they were successful. I forget the number, whatever. But of the people that survived, that the Coast Guard rescued, or that they, you know, that made it, they said, I immediately regretted it as soon as I let go. To like almost to a T. Almost none of them never try again. And so the way that I try to explain to people now, especially, no one really says the really shitty things about suicide to you once you're publicly suicidal, because people aren't mean, but like whenever that spot comes up, or if I know people who've said, you know, like, oh, this person's just doing it to be controlling, or it's like, dude, most, in my opinion, non-scientific opinion, most suicides, successful suicides, are failed cries for help. Like, obviously, yeah, there's a large number of people that shot themselves in the head. Like, that's probably the, you know, I mean, it's like, well, how is that a failed cry for help? It's like, because the people who survive, or the people that do that, are the people who have these survival stories. Like, I walked around the city trying to get somebody to be nice to me. And if nobody was, I was going to go home and shoot myself in the head. Like, you hear that story all the time. And so it's like that day specifically, like, or whatever, you get in this weird, I mean, I was very, very, very low on sleep and was near hallucinating. I wouldn't say I was literally hallucinating, but like you get in a really bad spot, like where you're not like thinking at all, at least for me. So I can definitely relate to like that argument of being like, oh man, like, you know what I mean? Like someone's going to come save me, or, you know what I mean? I'm going to get closer and closer and closer and closer to this until I figure out a way to make it happen. And so I wish that like more of the conversation would shift towards that. Now I get it. I don't even know if this is going to make air, and I wouldn't hold it against you guys if you cut it. Cause it's so hard. It's such a gnarly thing. And now I probably, rightfully so, you guys are going to probably put some warnings in this, and I highly recommend it. But I think if we're going to talk about this, let's talk about it. You know what I mean? So that's been my attitude the whole time.
And I think that's a great attitude to have. And I appreciate you sharing these thoughts, because I do think it's a discussion worth having. Again, I'm just a swimmer. You're just a swimmer. We're not medical professionals, but I think it's a good topic to discuss and get out there in the open. So,
and I guess if I have two more like things that I've been frustrated with since I've been public, I became public once I became healthy. And there's only one reason I did it. It was to have conversations like this so someone else can like maybe benefit from my experience, because I'm not famous. I'm not Tom Cruise. I understand that. But I get these interviews and some people look at these. So I was like, even if like a couple people, blah, 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 even if one person, but, and since then it's been great. It's been actually surprising like how many adults relate to this. And how many children or teenagers, you know, the people that follow me. I don't really have like an under 12 following, but you know what I mean? Like kids. Yeah. Now that I'm 30, I can call them kids. You know, that didn't surprise me. I kind of thought that was going to be like the target here, but what did surprise me was how many adults relate to this or feel this way, or are surprised that I may feel this way. So I think that's been super positive. And the other thing is, I'm not here to help you. I know that's hard to hear for some people, but I'm not a therapist and I don't know what you should do. It's kind of weird to say, but some people reach out or have this like expectation where like, oh, what should I do? It's like, I don't know. Like, I'm not that guy. Like, I have some experience here. Of course, if you run into me, or if you want to pick my brain, or if, you know, I end up replying to a message or whatever, if we have a conversation, I'd love to help you as much as I can, but I'm not a professional in this field at all. And so I think that's very important to communicate. And I should have done a better job communicating that in the lead in, probably the front part of this hour. And I probably should have done a better job in November or December of 2019 when I came out about it. But so that's probably on me more than anything. But that is kind of the two parts I didn't expect in this whole experience.
Which makes sense. And, you know, yeah, I think we have people in the media that we look up to, you know, because they swim fast, and then we think they know all of life's secrets about a lot of other things too.
Yeah, I did this without pills because I was super afraid of them, but that doesn't mean they're bad. If I probably maybe should have, and I can't answer that for everybody. You know what I mean? I cannot even really answer it for myself. All I know is what I did and what ended up happening.
Yeah. Well, again, Tom, I appreciate you sharing these experiences with us. It's always great talking, and I really hope things go well moving forward into Tokyo.
Thank you guys so much.
You've been listening to the SwimSwam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take SwimSwam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.